Hey guys, how's it going? Michael Troy here. Today we are looking at David Mazzucchelli's Daredevil Born Again Artisan Edition from IDW. Super cool book. Can't wait to show it to you guys. So hit subscribe and like. I'm going to cue the intro and I'll be right back.
FitzTroytv, comic book art critiques. Snark, pizza, and sarcastic ways. Levels and geeky gaze. Aliens, comics rule the day. Hurry up and turn that page. Michael FitzTroy.
All right, so Frank Miller. I just recently covered Dark Knight Returns, but I love Frank Miller's Daredevil just as much. And he wrote and drew Daredevil, but he also wrote Daredevil, and David Mazzucchelli illustrated it for their amazing story, Born Again. IDW does these artist editions. Normally, they're actual size, like of the actual boards that they were drawn on, and it's just like scanning the original art to show you like the nuts and bolts of the art, where you can see the pencil lines and the guidelines, and there's no colors, and they're amazing. It's a brilliant showcase for art. I love these books. I wish I had the artist edition. This is the artist edition, so that's a little bit smaller. It's still larger than the printed comic book. They're just a lot more affordable. They're not hardcover, and they're a little smaller in size. So if you can't find the hard, they sell out kind of instantly. Someone brought up the good point that you kind of have to jump on them when they come out if you want them, because they are so limited, and they can get super expensive depending on which book it is. So if I have to take it in a sort of, trade paperback, smaller version, I'll take it, because David Mazzucchelli's art is so beautiful. I'm so excited to just sink my teeth into this. It's funny, I'm trying to wipe away what makes this special. Like, oh, there's the little mark there. Oh yeah, that's because it was on the original board. Anyway, Frank Miller and Mazzucchelli went on to work on Batman Year One together, which is an amazing book too. And Mazzucchelli's art, it's funny because when he first started doing Daredevil, I found it very Gene Colan-esque, which is awesome because Gene Colan is one of the best, Daredevil artists and artists, period, comic book artists, period, out there. And so it's kind of cool to see Mazzucchelli sort of develop his style and just sort of really break out. And just there's so much goodness in here. And I just absolutely love it. I think that pairing with, Mazzucchelli has gone on to do many amazing things after his, collaborations with Frank Miller. But I think that they definitely brought out the best in each other. And Born Again is just like one of the greatest comic book stories ever told. See, this is so cool. They include, like, I love this. A lot of effects were done on vellum, which is like an overlay. Sometimes they would even, it's a transparent overlay that you put over the art, and then the way it prints, you can see both pages. And they did a lot of inking sometimes, I guess, if they wanted to preserve the original pencils. Sometimes lettering was done on vellum. As an artist, I personally find vellum very difficult to work with. I think it's hard to see through. I think that the ink sort of slides all over the place on it, unless I just haven't been schooled in like the best use or how to adequately use vellum. I personally can't stand it. But this is from the 80s, and there are no computers for all the bells and whistles. So they're taking advantage of so many different inking effects, like duo shade and zipatone, like screens, just that adds so much to art. It's funny because this really stands on its own very well as black and white. What a great shot of Kingpin. That is so cool. Just when I thought that Bill Sienkiewicz had the market on drawing the coolest ever Kingpin, I turn to this page drawn by David Mazzucchelli. I don't know, there's something so cool and gangster about this that looks totally timeless. I don't know. I feel like Mazzucchelli definitely got more noir working with Frank Miller, and perhaps vice versa. Um, you know, the use of blacks, the spotting of blacks, the sort of setting the tone for the story. It's called Born Again. There's a lot of religious overtones. They kind of have similar splash pages, sort of mirroring, as you'll see as we go through the book. But I don't know. He's just using so many different types of. So when I say zibbatone, it's basically like a plastic overlay that you cut out with an X-Acto knife to fit where you want to add some blacks, add some depth, add some tone. You know, coloring was very rudimentary back then. There wasn't a lot of like gray tones or anything like that. So pretty much, which is funny because when colored, you know, computer coloring first came around, it's very beautiful, the depth and effects that they get. But sometimes it doesn't mesh well with some of the old school artists. For example, one of my favorites, John Byrne. If you watch my channel, you know I cover a lot of Byrne. Sometimes I do not. I think it takes the right colorist for him, especially modern colorists. Like his art just does not look good over rendered, because I think in answering my own question here, I think like there's so much of the information already here. Like just look at the depth of detail in these buildings and the windows, and you kind of don't want to take away from that. Just the way that, you know, great perspective. Bird's eye view. I mean, Mazzucchelli is kind of a master storyteller, and definitely, I mean, I think he definitely gets a lot of appreciation, but his name should be, you know, right up there with Frank Miller and all the other greats. Although I think that after his main stints with Batman and Daredevil, he did a lot of like more indie type projects and more personal projects, and more power to him. There's just so many beautiful things in the art in this book. I just love this. When you talk about the use of negative space, um, like just to have this panel here, and it's funny because it's a Daredevil book, and you would think I'd be pointing out some like great shot of him fighting Kingpin or Elektra or Bullseye or something, but I'm always drawn to like the super artistic things, just the way that the use of negative space and the spotting of blacks here, and just how there's all this open, gorgeous space. It's a good juxtaposition. You know, comic book art, it's funny because I think the difference and possible advantage of comic book art, perhaps some may see it as a disadvantage as opposed to cinematic storytelling. You have the whole page to sort of tell the story, and a lot of artists worth their salt like to, you know, step back from a page and take it all in at once and just have it, you know, your eye follows this sort of Z formation across the page, and I don't know, it just really stands out as such a great panel. So many good things going on. I just love Zibbatone. They don't even make it anymore. Um, I I've never worked with it. It seems a little tricky to work with, like having to literally like take an X-Acto blade and cut out all of this work here. I mean, talk about patience. And it's now just all a click of a mouse, click of a mouse. I mean, I think in a way that things like Procreate, I mean, I use Procreate. It's super handy. It's great. It's awesome. But I don't know. There's just something about there, getting in there, touching the board, getting your hands dirty, hearing the pencil on the page. I mean, just so many things. It's a very oral, AURAL experience, as well as a visual one, a psychological one. I mean, art is no joke. I will tell you that. Great use of duo shade here. Duo shade is like a special paper that when you apply a chemical to it, it reveals this pattern on the page, and they used it to add depth and shading, especially I think for when there was no color in comics, in comic strips. You know, it helped out a lot with that. And that was probably their, you know, their Photoshop, their Procreate, them taking shortcuts. But it's just such a craft into and of itself, which I guess you could argue that, using tools like Procreate and Photoshop is a craft and, into itself. I mean, you kind of have to know what you're doing. God knows, it took me forever to figure out. It took me years to, like, even nail layers. Like, that's how hip and with it I am. This is so cool. I love this panel so much. I don't know, I just love to get into Mazzucchelli's head and while he's designing all this stuff and, like, where is he going? I love seeing this here because he has such a noir sort of, I don't know, leaning towards the grim and gritty kind of aesthetic in his art. And then you get this gorgeous, like, in my mind, like, this is an homage to the John Romita Daredevil. Very slick lines, very streamlined, very heroic looking, and I love it. I think it's great. I love the versatility and the diversity, and it doesn't, like, stand out as shocking. It's not like Bruce Timm drew it or something like that, so it still fits in. And I love this, this background here. One of my friends was just talking about this process. Some sort of, like, I want to say that's probably Xerox of a photograph right there. I mean, this is the other great thing about these artist editions is that if you're an artist, this is definitely like a crash course and just like an education. Just like looking at the pages, like going back to my burn again, like looking at the X-Men burn one, like I've always loved Terry Austin as an inker, but I just gained like so much more respect and admiration for his love of the craft and just everything he puts into it, just every single page. Very similar to this, maybe not these two pages, but, you're seeing a lot of different techniques and tones and textures. And I think, there was some videos going around, is comic art not as good as it used to be? And my answer to that, one of the answers, see how the splash page is sort of similar, and they get cooler and cooler as they go along, by the way. Spoiler, not going into too much of the story just because I haven't read it in forever, and this book is really showcasing Mazzucchelli's art, so that's why we're staying on that topic. I didn't finish my thought, but I do that a lot. Sorry, guys. Anyway. I mean, this is a different type of Zipatone. I just can't even imagine, like, the storage space you would need for all this Zipatone. And I wonder if it was expensive. Have any of you artists watching this worked with Zipatone? How do you like it? I mean, obviously the effect is undeniably cool. I mean, it's just so great. So this looks like he's slapping down some Zipatone and then putting some whiteout over it, because you can see the whiteout isn't quite as white as it should be. I mean, it'll print totally white. That's like how printing was. Like, they used to do a lot of penciling with blue pencil because it wouldn't reproduce. And now it does. Everything reproduces. So I don't even know if they can still do that. But I'm sure there is a way. Kingpin has always cracked me up as one of these. I mean, he's like so big, but I guess he is. I mean, did Frank Miller make him like the sumo wrestler? I'm not too familiar with the early days of Daredevil and Kingpin. Although that was some gorgeous Romita senior art, and apparently he loved drawing Daredevil, and it showed. And like, once again, I love Gene Colan's art. Karen Page, poor Karen Page. Frank Miller turns her into a heroin addict. How awful. But, I mean, we're living in the world of Daredevil and Hell's Kitchen and Kingpin. I mean, Daredevil is not a pretty world or for the weak of heart. And just such a great character. I mean, it's weird because, I feel like Batman obviously gets way more hype and attention, but Daredevil has just as many, if not more, equally amazing, like, stories and runs and just, like, great efforts by so many different creative teams. Like, I really loved, it's funny, like, I feel like John Romita Jr., speaking of John Romita Sr., is kind of one of those divisive artists. People either really love him or hate him. And I go back and forth. Like, I love some of his stuff. I really hated him taking over X-Men after Paul Smith, but that's just because I love Paul Smith so much, and it was kind of jarring to have this big, blocky, kind of ugly style coming in after it. But then, like, John Romita Jr. and Nocenti, Daredevil, one of my favorite runs in comic books. Love it. The art is spectacular. And of course, it all depends on the inker, and that's where I think I was going to go. I see it all comes from full circle. Where I was going with is, modern comic book art not as good. And I think that the utter and almost complete elimination of inkers, so many artists ink their own work now, and sometimes it's not even inked, and inkers have just really diminished, and these books really showcase what inking does for comic books. And you pair the right penciler and inker together, see how cool these splash pages are getting, and like all this duo shade in there. This page is so gross and grimy. Like, I don't know if that's coffee or what the hell on it is, but it's pretty amazing to see it. And all these little like notes in the liners. Sometimes, the artist would write notes to the colorist or whatever, depending on what effects they might need. All these overlays are crazy. But back to inkers, I just think that inkers just bring so much to the table. And, like a penciler, I mean, sometimes I hate to use the word fix, but, sometimes there might be wonky anatomy or something, and a good inker can come in, because all the great inkers, especially of the past, were, artists in their own right, and pencilers as well. So they could come in and fix little things and definitely help out and add so much and bring so much to the table, because it's like you have two people sort of wanting to express their own artistry and just make something great. I'm all for, pencilers who inking their own work. I generally think a lot of pencilers do ink their own stuff the best. However, a good penciler does not a good inker make. And sometimes I think that a good inker can just really, really elevate. I mean, an inker can make or break a penciler. So, I mean, you just don't have a lot of great penciler inker teams anymore. And, I feel like the emphasis isn't even on the art. Unless we're talking about like indie comics or self-published comics. I mean, that's where you're going to find real, true artistry and beauty. I know a lot of indie artists now, and I've been able to work with a few recently on some cool projects, and they get me excited currently. I mean, like my friend Tony McMillan just did this awesome Friday the 13th comic book, and the art is just so cool and visceral and amazing, and just like gets me way more excited to see something like that than anything, coming out from, what do you call it? Marvel and DC these days. Not to say that there isn't some great art. It just feels like, I don't know, less fanfare or something like that. So I guess this was a whole thing. Mazzucchelli doing these great covers that are reminding me of John Romita Sr. Isn't that crazy? I wonder, like, these are some nice, like, great quality books. Like, if you're into, like, really good art books, even if you're not an artist, just to love and appreciate comic books, these IDW has just done such a favor to the industry and to artists and to comic fans by producing these gorgeous books. I mean, it's like the closest we'll ever get to holding the original pages, especially, this many at the same time. See, this is cool. This is like such a turning point in the in the story for me. And like we've been utilizing this sort of half splash page. And now we get like the full Monty. And also, I mean, I'm sure it's pretty evident, but it's like you have Matt sort of laid out and he looks like he's, you know, crucified here. There's definitely cross imagery. And the story is called Born Again for the Love of Pete, so it's not like it's such a stretch to figure out that there's heavy religious connotations going throughout the story. And so I think that that is super cool. See, that's giving me kind of Gene Colan vibes there. It's how he kind of uses the side of his pencil and suggests so much with just simplicity, and it's intricate in its simplicity in a way, if that makes any sense. And hand lettering, I love hand lettering. I mean, it's all digital now, which is fine, you know, as long as it's a good font that isn't distracting or take you out of the story. But I don't know, there's just something, you know, I feel like I like to refer to myself as an artist, as a cartoonist, because I feel like, you know, it's like when you're penciling, inking, lettering, and just doing the whole shebang, you're just a cartoonist, and there's nothing more respectable or, I don't know, cool about that than just saying you're an artist. I mean, why not embrace it? I love comic book art. It's so cool. This is a fun panel here. It's always funny. I feel like I can always tell. I don't know if you guys can too. Check this out with this great, like, I love that so much with the Venetian blinds. It screams kind of 80s aesthetic or whatever, but definitely seeing a lot of this stuff coming forward in like Sin City and Frank Miller's future works. So who knows how they collaborated here. I mean, I'm feeling that Frank Miller was definitely putting a lot of description and sort of what he wanted out of the art into the script, and boy did Mazzucchelli bring it. And I'm sure it was an educational experience and quite a rewarding one for both of them. I mean, if it wasn't, there's something wrong. But I know sometimes great things can be born from bad experiences, so whatever. But I was gonna say, I can sort of always tell when it's like supposed to be a real person, because suddenly the details get really intricate and specific when you're trying to capture someone's likeness. I feel just so much goodness here. It's funny in a way, this was kind of also reminding me of some of the stuff, and I passed right over the panel, but it's reminding me of Bill Sienkiewicz. This was kind of reminding me of Bill Sienkiewicz, sort of towards the end of his run on New Mutants. And Bill Sienkiewicz has said before that he takes everything, inspiration from all over the place, anything from anywhere. So good on him. It's like, I kind of like that about comic book art, you know? If an artist likes the way somebody draws fog or something and then emulates it, I mean, it always winds up being their own version anyway. I mean, look at Kirby Crackle. I always say any artist worth his salt has at least used Kirby Crackle in one project at one time or point. I can't imagine it being appropriate in this book here, but we'll see if it pops up. I haven't seen any yet. Karen looking a little dark and dreary there. And I'm a junkie and I've got to find Matt or I'll be murdered. Oh my God, that's so cool. I mean, that's so great. There's so much suggestion, you know what I mean? It's like this car is covered in snow and just, I don't know, just like, it just looks perfect. It looks so great. I love the way he draws New York City, the streets, like from the ground level to the above the rooftops. I mean, it's just amazing. He definitely is like one of the finest comic book artists ever. And I'm loving this book so much. I think it's so beautiful. DC, unfortunately, for whatever reason, I think they did a couple, but they don't do these artisan editions. They don't want to. And if they're saving it to publish on their own, that would be fine. But why deprive us of, like, I would love to see Batman Year One get this treatment. And maybe it has. I don't know. I mean, I know DC does do some noir style books, but not to this level with like the, you know, the scans of the actual pages. Sometimes it's just the art without the color, which is also fun. I love looking at that kind of stuff too, so that's cool. It's funny, I just talked about hand lettering, and clearly there's like some sort of font print use going on here, but it's cut out and pasted onto the page as opposed to being typed in with the computer. Joe Rosen. Very cool. We've sort of broken from that mode of splash page, I feel, a little bit. It looks like a humongous tampon. I wonder if that was the model. Sometimes artists use things lying around the house to know how to draw certain things. Let's hope not, huh? Very cool print there. I love that. That is so cool. See, you can't even see the lettering. I wonder how that worked out in print. I'm sure just fine. They knew what they were doing. Joe, don't do balloon for this panel. New dialogue. See, I love it. Just a little note to the letterer. It gives you like such a... I'm always so curious about like the nuts and bolts, the behind the scenes, the making of kind of thing. So it is super cool and fun to see all of this stuff. It's funny because like for the, you know, for a lot of it, it's like so dark and grim and shadowy. And then suddenly you get these bright, like almost white pages with like even the absence of like a cast shadow or something. Very cool. And obviously someone who does research and draws an actual real working looking gun. Not pointing any fingers at all the 90s artists who drew, you know, vacuum cleaner guns or blow dryer guns with humongous weird attachments that didn't make sense, or have triggers, or bow and arrow without a string on it, anything like that. I don't know. Just a lot of artistry. That's a gorgeous panel there. Grotesquely beautiful, I would say. I mean, she was so at the end of her rope, but she still looks pretty. You can sort of see, like, the pretty woman she was, and you get to see her deteriorate throughout this story, so that's cool, too. Are you dying? I mean, if you guys have never treated yourself to any of these artist or artisan books, definitely do it. So worth it. What a great splash page. So much raw emotion. He puts a lot of... It's funny because, you know, there is a sort of simplicity to this in a way, but it makes it more effective. Like, you know, like you can get a lot of power and impact from a simple image sometime. And I mean, this is so telling. And of course, you know, like Frank Miller, I guess, has an advantage of being an artist and a writer himself. You know, I'm assuming they worked the Marvel... I don't know if they did full script or the Marvel method. I'm sure they did the Marvel method because Frank Miller was working on a lot of stuff, and I don't know if he had time to write full scripts. Not that I would know any of that, but, you know, it's like you've got the full story in this page, so I'm glad he didn't feel the need to litter the page with a bunch of, like, expository captions and, you know, dramatic dialogue. Oh, Matt, oh my God, my syringe is on the ground. I'm such a junkie. Shh, there, it's okay, Karen. I mean, see, I just totally ruined that page by doing that. So I'm glad that the writer didn't feel the need to. Very cool cover. It's funny because, once again, very simplistic, but the impact of the printed version, as I recall, was pretty amazing. So, Flag Smasher. And they're doing all this stuff. It's so funny because, you know, to have this be like they have to do it in a different color and do different effects in the printing to have those lines drop out. And it was just such a cool process. And this is my nerdism, if I could go back in time, I would love to just like go through the whole process with somebody, from like pencils to printing, just to see exactly how this was done and how they made the magic happen, which is ironic because the printing was so crappy at the time. The paper wasn't great. The printing wasn't great. A lot of the details fell out. A lot of the blacks became muddy. Yet that shows how dedicated artists are and how much artists put in so much work just for the love of the medium, because knowing all that or whatever, they still put in, like, art for, I mean, at the end of the day, I guess, a little bit of ego must tie into it, because your art does represent you and you do want to do your best showing. Just when you thought you had put in enough in your art, I say put in 100 times more. Never finish a page and look at it and say that's good enough. Say, how could it be better? And the flip side of that, and one of the problems I have as an artist, is overworking a page to death. Like, I'll get it to where, it's like such an evolution sometimes. Like, art can start out really great, and you can see the potential, and then it gets really freaking ugly, and then it gets gorgeous again. I think that happens a lot in the coloring process, especially. Like, it has to get ugly before it gets gorgeous. Maybe not so much in the pencils and the inks. But everyone has their own different artistic experience. Please feel free to share your artistic experience with me. I know that being an artist is just like a lot of guesswork, a lot of instinct. Some artists just have it. I mean, Jack Kirby apparently put his pencil up in this corner of the page, hit his magic button, whatever that may be, and went whoosh. And then suddenly there'd be Ego or Galactus or whatever genius thing he was working on that day. And no guidelines, like, want to kill him. It's funny because when I first started drawing, I didn't know about doing guidelines or, doing shapes. And I was a pretty darn good artist with a lot of potential. And I feel like once you start doing guidelines and stuff, in a way, it almost breaks you as an artist. Like, I feel like, because then I can't do it without the guidelines now. I mean, I could try. Maybe that's a good experiment. Try and see how it comes out. I mean, there's that one artist, that amazing artist, I can't think of his name, but he does that, and he does, like, murals like that, and that's just crazy. And it's all flawless, and I think that for those of you who don't believe in magic, there's definitely something magic happening there, so I can't explain it. Such beautiful art, and I love it, like, suddenly, and it seems so out of place, but it's so cool at the same time, because Daredevil is just sort of one of those cool characters that sort of lives in his own world. Yet, I mean, he's had plenty of crossovers with the rest of the Marvel Universe, so it is kind of cool. But for such a grim and gritty story and such a great story, it is kind of weird to see the Avengers pop up. And if they are going to pop up, do it like this. Like, how awesome. That is like Captain America to the core right there. And we get a profile. We don't even see his A, but we get the star. We got the heroic pose. I mean, that's amazing. And I don't think I could ask this side of Walt Simonson. I don't think Thor gets much better than that. That is freaking cool on so many levels. Like, wow. Even Iron Man. Even though I wasn't a super huge fan of that version of his costume, although I think I was reading it at the time. But don't hate that costume, but don't love it either. Very cool. Such beautiful, beautiful, beautiful art. I mean, I just love this. Like, just, like, it's not enough to have this great church scene with all these pews lined up and the nuns, and just, like, once again, another great use of spotting blacks. But then you have, like, the light coming in through the windows and the stained glass. It's so amazing. Just so beautiful. What a great artist. This is the other good thing if you're an artist, like, looking at these always is inspiring, always makes you want to be a better artist, always shows you something that you didn't notice or think of on your own that you might want to try. I'm telling you, who needs art college? Although if you have the opportunity to go to art college, you should. I know I wish I would have. I was all signed up and didn't go like an idiot, but that's a story for another kind of channel. This is so, I love this. I have to show this to you before I turn the page because this is such an amazing, great page. Just beautiful. Once again, the negative space, the spotting of blacks, just like so cool. I mean, Captain America sitting at one of those ridiculous, uncomfortable chairs that roll all over the place. And then you get the effect, and it's just like two little things, but you have to do it just to get that little screen. And that's like, I don't know, that's the commitment to detail that I kind of just love. And I think it's sort of absent from modern comics. Aruga. See, it's some famous comic book artist, I forget who it was just calling to eliminate sound effects in comic books. Screw you. I want my kablam. I want my aruga. I want my snicked. I want my bamf. I mean, come on. Sound effects are almost, some sound effects thwip. Thank you very much. What would Spider-Man be without thwip? I mean, what other medium is so freaking, like, well-rounded that has so many iconic things attached to something as silly as a sound effect? Although I'm sure there's a million movies that have the same thing going for them. But you know what I mean? Like, certain characters are just synonymous with their costumes, their origins, their looks, and their sound effects. Their signature sound effects that are created by their power or something. Another great splash page. I mean, this really is just the gift that keeps giving. And it's an amazing story on top of it, despite the beautiful art. See, this is what I mean. Like, this picture of them just walking through the city. I mean, it just feels so lush and so lived in and so real and so amazing. Very beautiful. David Mazzucchelli, I love your art. Marvel Age, number 36 cover. Marvel Age had some really cool covers. I mean, look how gorgeous this is. And it's pretty amazing in color, too. I'm glad they included both. I love the stained glass Captain America. How cool is that? Who knew Captain America would look so good in stained glass? Well, duh. Ooh, and we get to see some penciled pages. It's interesting because Mazzucchelli and Miller, I feel, had a kind of similar aesthetic at the time as far as their pencils go. Kind of rough and sketchy. Great movement. That's another thing. A lot of comic art is very stiff now, and I don't know if that's from people tracing poses or wherever they're getting their art, but there's just such like a fluidity to this era of comic art that just was so necessary and so like exciting. Just keeping the flow of, I mean, there's such great choreography and storytelling here. It's mind-blowing. Mind-blowing, people, I tell you. I couldn't love this book more. The best 40 bucks I've spent recently. Totally worth every penny. Amazing. David Mazzucchelli. You're the best. All right, so that was David Mazzucchelli's Daredevil Born Again Artisan Edition from IDW and Marvel Comics, celebrating the tremendous art of David Mazzucchelli, showcased in Daredevil Born Again, written by Frank Miller. Such a treasure. Very happy to have shared this with you guys today. Thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe to my channel, hit like, share my content, and I'll bring some more to you soon. All right, thanks, guys.